Welcome to the Eternal Vegano Television Network nightly news, or weekly news break. John, first story on the docket tonight. There is a curious situation in a parish in Pueblo, Colorado, where the bishop is strong-arming parishioners into the mask and virus religion. Tell us about it.
This was from a Church Militant article. They did the research and they got the quotes, and so I'm just going to read off a little bit of their article. It says the Pueblo, Colorado Bishop Stephen Berg, he shocked parishioners at Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of the Assumption Church by having the deacon read a letter ordering them to wear masks in church. After the letter was read, a parishioner named Gary witnessed one of the armed security guards with a hand-on pistol approach another parishioner whose mask was hanging around his neck.
Oh,
true
goodness.
sin of the virus church.
Yeah, it's mortal sin in the virus church.
The armed guard escorted the parishioner outside the church, and the visiting priest, referred to as Father Tony, had not dressed for Mass and told the congregation Mass was canceled. The priest was overheard saying, "I get paid whether I say Mass or not." Gary said he later found out a sheriff deputy's vehicle was parked a couple blocks away in case the congregation of mostly retirees caused any trouble. I mean, this is like... This is so bizarre. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah, you have the police, actually armed security guards, were walking around ready to draw on somebody because their mask is not up. We'll cancel the mask. The virus comes first above all things. You see the craziness that's there.
We'll cancel mask, not the mask. We want to cancel the mask.
Cancel the mask, not the mask. Put that on a bumper sticker. Cancel the mask, not the mask.
Well, and the interesting thing here is the armed security is for the people not following virus regulations. It's not for people who might happen to be storming inside the cathedral protesting abortion rights or whatever, like we saw in the Columbus Cathedral. If you haven't seen it, I don't know if you should check it out. It's pretty disturbing. And no one fought back.
No.
And this is a different, completely different state, completely different story. But, I don't know what we're going to have to do. But you would think that the security would be to protect the people inside, not to discourage them from being there. But it's just a situation where the Novus Ordo, I think, is going to destroy itself.
It's dying. It'll be dead in a year or two if they keep this up. The people they don't want to put up with this stuff anymore. And now you have armed security who's enforcing these mask regulations. As we did a show before, what about Catholicism? What about making sure, why don't we have security that makes sure Catholicism is being taught? This guy should have his hand on the gun whenever the priest is up there preaching the sermon. Whereas if he gets a little loose with his Christology or stuff about the scripture, he's ready to draw on this priest. Or if the priest is up there, mass facing the people, "The Lord be with you, and with..." What do they say in the Novus Ordo? "And with
your spirit.
Yeah, okay. And then he starts reading, a collect or something, and then that security guard has the text there, and he's just itching, waiting for him to make up something, an ad lib, and then he's going to draw on him. That's in a functional Catholic church. I guess if you're going to have armed security in the church, maybe that's the things that they would be looking for.
I think a more realistic scenario would be he has a paintball gun. Every time the priest preaches heresy, he fires at him. And so the priest will have to explain to the bishop why he needs new vestments, why he needs money for new vestments.
It's actually, we said this on a show before, it would be far worse for that priest to do some kind of common criminal activity than it is for him to preach heresy. So actually, capital punishment is licit for heresy. Now, I'm not saying it should happen right then and there, like vigilante.
There should be a trial.
Yeah. Let's get witnesses, etc., etc. But anyway, you see this satanic inversion that's now exists in the Novus Ordo Church. For instance, in our diocese, which shall be remain nameless, you go to the website and you're looking for information about whatnot. The only thing that's on there is virus news. Everything that's there is, "Well, we canceled Palm Sunday, too dangerous. You can't get a St. Blaise blessing because we don't want candles touching anybody. You can't. Ashes will be distributed at a distance. Maybe what they should have. Yeah, maybe they should have a long stick with like a little scoop on the end of it, and then and you're behind glass. The priest is behind glass, but the scoop is through there, and you stand in there, and they twist it, and the ashes fall on your forehead. And maybe there's like in this booth, there's like a speaker that says, "Remember, man, that you are dust, and to dust you shall return." You're not even getting that in the Novus Ordo regime. That is. You won't even get that. Now the edict that comes from apparently the Pope and his henchman Cardinal Sarah, boo, is that, well, you have to wear a mask and a mask on top of a mask, and you can't say anything when you're in front of the person, especially you can't talk about death in the midst of a pandemic. You're not allowed to say, "Remember, man, you are dust, and to dust you shall return." Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked about the virus religion. And then on the website, all this stuff about COVID this, COVID that, wear a mask, masks are not optional, blah, 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 blah. It is, in a functional Catholic diocese, the page would be about, evangelization and great liturgy. Do you want to be a priest? And in this place, it's all virus. All virus all the time. That should be the slogan for our diocese.
Well, and actually you brought up an interesting point about the new distribution of ashes, which will probably be a separate video or a separate segment. Stay tuned. We still have a few weeks till Lent, so that'll be coming up.
It's coming up. John, Catholic News Agency, asks a question. Are changes coming to the Vatican Dicastery for Communications?
Well, it looks like it. There's rumors, which we know that there's always rumors about everything, yeah. But there's rumors from the Vatican saying that the Vatican Communications Department might make a shake-up, so Pope Francis is going to redesign the dicastery, and there were reports that indicate the Pope was unhappy with the poor coverage the Vatican Dicastery for Communications gave to Pope Francis' latest slate of interviews.
So are these airplane interviews or interviews with Scalfari?
Well, I think the thing here was that Pope Francis didn't inform the Dicastery that he would be doing these interviews. Yeah. And so I don't know if it's a lot of backstabbing or whatever, like feelings got hurt, like he didn't run it through us and whatever. But I guess one of the questions we had was, how will this impact Father James Martin? Because as you know, Father James Martin is on one of the committees for, is it communications? Or
something like that, yeah.
He's involved with this department somehow, so believe it or not, the Pope promotes Father James Martin. Mm-hmm. So how do you think this will impact Father Martin?
My guess would be, in the worst possible scenario, which is now the most likely because this is the Francis regime, is that he will probably make Father James Martin to be probably head of this Vatican Dicastery for Communications. I think that means he might even end up becoming an archbishop of some sort.
I don't think he would be promoted to the head, but I think... Okay. My opinion is I think he's going to kind of work his way up slowly up this communications department, because Father James Martin has a lot of revenue streams, I believe. He's got a lot of followers on Twitter.
I think he's associated or maybe is the editor with America or Commonweal.
Yeah.
One of those Jesuit magazines.
So you made a good point about the archbishop thing, though, and a lot of people I've seen this before, is that a lot of people think that Father James Martin will not become a bishop in the United States of a diocese.
Oh, yeah.
But they think, based on the Pope's promotion of Father James Martin, they're both Jesuits, blah, 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 he will become a bishop within the Vatican.
Yeah,
that's what they're speculating.
Yeah.
So, you won't have to worry. Don't worry too much about Father James Martin becoming your next bishop. That's unlikely. But he may become a bishop.
Yeah, and this kind of thing has happened before in the sense that there have been horrific bishops and archbishops in the Vatican. I mean, look at Archbishop Annibale Bugnini, who was, I think he was first secretary of this Liturgical Reform Commission, and then I think it was Paul VI made him the archbishop, but he was an archbishop in charge of basically nothing except wrecking the liturgy in the Vatican. And this is the problem with this stuff, is that you've got this guy and you want him to do a job, like these diplomats. And so you have to consecrate him and make him a titular archbishop so he can be a diplomat for here, there, or anything. For instance, like Archbishop Gullickson, who just retired. He was not in charge of anything, but he was apostolic nuncio to Ukraine and then Switzerland and some kind of diplomat. So he had to be, because he was a pope's legate, he had to be an archbishop. And this is, again, one of these strange things in the Vatican, that you just take a guy, make him an archbishop, and put him in charge of not even a diocese, just some pushing papers or doing some work or whatever. But yeah, I agree with you. I would expect Father James Martin to be named a bishop and work in Rome. John, the bad guys got some bad news for once. There was a hilarious and terrific article in the National Catholic Distorter. Can you tell us about that article?
Yeah, so we don't normally promote the National Catholic Distorter stuff. It's mostly fake news, and they actually got me this week. They actually fooled me, and you had to call me out for it on email. But not on any of my videos, but on our email conversations. Yeah. But this one actually, it read as satire, because I was like, I don't know if I really want to read it. And as I read it more, I was like, it got progressively hilarious. And so I'm going to read parts of the article. And so what happens is there's this parish in, was it North Carolina, I believe, the Diocese of Charlotte. Yeah. And there's a trad priest that came in, and the angry heretics left the parish. Now, this article said that some went to attend an unsanctioned mass in an auto body shop. The auto body shop was actually run by someone who was married to a parishioner who isn't actually Catholic. So I don't know if they're inviting in some priest or if a woman's saying mass or what.
That's great. And they said they have mass, and there's like, here's used cars, cars in various states of repair. It sounds like it's like this catacomb here, you know? So the bad guys are now in a catacomb, believe it or not.
We've chased them away.
Yeah.
And some have joined the local Lutheran and Episcopal churches. Well, that's good, because that fits more with their theology. Yeah. The funny thing is, though, that with this parish, they're saying like 3 Novus Ordos and 3 Latin Masses. So, I mean, you can still attend the Novus Ordo, they just hate Catholicism.
They don't like the flavor of the Novus Ordo, because they say, oh, this isn't the Vatican II liturgy that I grew up with the bongos and the hand-holding and the dancing. Oh.
Well, now you know how the previous generation felt. And yeah, but anyway, I have some hilarious quotes, and read the full article for yourself. It's a long article.
You can put the link in the description below.
I will, and it's a riot. But I'm going to read you some quotes just to maybe crack you up a little bit. So, so while Pope Francis preaches an accompaniment for all spiritual seekers and castigates clericalism, he once described young priests who put a premium on enforcing church regulations as little monsters. Seminaries in the U.S. continue to graduate priests for ordination who look not to Francis but to Pope John Paul II for inspiration. It is a quiet, awkward, and uneasy kind of schism in church practice and discipline. So they're not even trad.
Yeah,
they're JP2,
they're JP2 and they can't stand that there's JP2 priests.
Oh no, here's a guy who didn't want women to be priests.
Oh! Tearing their garments.
It's a quote, "It's an alternative magisterium," Father Tim Kelly, a pastor in the Diocese of Tyler, Texas, told NCR.
Wait, pause. Isn't Tyler, Texas where Bishop Strickland is?
Yes, Bishop Strickland needs to excommunicate
this priest should be under interdict or something.
Yeah, at least reprimanded.
Continue reading what he said, because he's crazy, this priest, Father Tim Kelly.
He continues, "This thing has been coming out of the cult of John Paul," who noted, said Kelly, who noted that many of the seminarians discount the focus of Francis and his efforts to renew the church.
His efforts to renew the church.
Like, this is
going so well.
This is
attending mass.
It's a riot.
It is. I mean, this is like the bizarro world.
The more you read through it, it's like, what are these? Like, what religion is this?
Yeah, he sent this to me, and I said, "Is this parody? Is this what? Who wrote this?" Continue on there.
So I'm going to talk about a parishioner. Jack Hellenbrand came to Boone, which I'm assuming is the town.
It's in North Carolina.
Yeah, 16 years ago from Wisconsin. Buckler, the priest, has distributed aesthetic sensibilities. Has disturbed aesthetic sensibilities through his changes, he told NCR. Many old parishioners were part of the renovating of the church and establishing a simple wooden altar created to blend visually into the landscape of the Appalachians.
They make it sound like the altar is outdoors and there's like a mountain there or something. I don't know. And then they put up this wooden. It sounds like it's totally a Cranmer table that they put there.
It's
freestanding Cranmer table, probably as flimsy as that. Well, I shouldn't call this flimsy. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a beautiful desk on the set of the Eternal Vigano television network, so I shouldn't criticize it. I'm sure that their Novus Ordo Cranmer table, made out of wood, which blends visually into the landscape of the Appalachians, I'm sure it's much nicer.
Well, it is, I mean, it is kind of a beautiful landscape. I'm assuming they're in western North Carolina. But anyway, to continue, Buckler, the priest, put in giant candles on the altar in which Hillenbrand described as a counter-Reformation touch common in German churches. Hillenbrand, 53, is a teacher of German. I don't know why they pointed that out. It is not the look of a modern church which melds with the natural beauty of North Carolina.
Again, I don't know why. How does Germany look much different than North Carolina? I mean, there's mountains, there's woods, and why should? What does large, tall candlesticks have anything to do with North Carolina?
Well, it's
crazy.
The trad priest put the candles on the altar, and he's complaining about it.
Yeah.
So.
So
I don't know, but
about North Carolina and the Appalachians.
I don't know. Are you worshiping the earth? It sounds like it. But anyway, the last quote, he says, it all goes back to the Counter-Reformation. I have a huge problem with that because I have a historical sense.
So is he for the Reformation or against it? I don't know. If he's for the Reformation and doesn't like tall candlesticks, he could maybe go over to the Episcopalian Church or the church in the auto body shop and attend like their pretend Eucharist there or whatever. But this is the Catholic Church, and we believe in the Counter-Reformation, and we believe in Catholicism, and we believe in tall candlesticks.
Well, and what kind of history is he talking about? Like, is he talking about church history? Because I think they use candles in church history. Isn't it in the book of the Apocalypse?
And I'm sure that there were some that were probably big. And historically, they've always been on the altar. I don't know if you'll find an apostolic church that doesn't have candles on the altar.
The Novus Ordo Church is
That's
now.
not an apostolic church. Sorry.
Maybe the Byzantines? I don't know.
They do have candles on the altar. Sorry.
All right, well, I don't know what this guy's talking about. Then maybe he needs to study his Reformation a little more.
Oh, Pope Francis has called Vatican II magisterial, and he has pounded his fist and says these things need to happen. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it kind of sounded like Bishop Barron. I'm going to read the quote from the article. Pope Francis insisted, "This is the magisterium. The council is the magisterium of the church. Either you are with the church and therefore you follow the council, and if you don't follow the council or you interpret it in your own way, as you desire, you do not stand with the church. He asks that there be no concessions to those who seek to present a catechesis that does not agree with the magisterium of the church." So Ryan, I found this very confusing.
Yeah.
So first off, what is the magisterium? And he talks about if you don't follow the council or you interpret it in your own way. So who interpreted the council and how was it interpreted? Because I'd like to know that.
Yeah, this is very interesting. I don't know if it was you or Brett that sent that to me this week. And I'm reading the book Apologia Pro Marcel Lefebvre by Michael Davies. And in that book, it's the first part of it, the first volume, so it's all of his dealings with Pope Paul VI. This reads just like the kind of stuff that Pope Paul VI and his henchmen were writing to Archbishop Lefebvre. This is the they come out there and they say, "This is the magisterium." And the funny thing is, these are things of which nobody is disputing. So we can go through these, and let's do this. Go through this one point at a time. So Pope Francis says, this is the magisterium, which is true. The magisterium is the teaching body of the Catholic Church. And so if the Pope teaches it written in an encyclical, it's part of the ordinary magisterium. An ecumenical council is by default part of the ordinary magisterium. But don't confuse the ordinary with the extraordinary magisterium. Extraordinary magisterium is when the Pope defines a dogma in an infallible statement, or an ecumenical council defines something in an infallible statement. Well, we know that Vatican II is not an exercise of the extraordinary magisterium because Pope Paul VI and Pope John the 23rd at the end and beginning of the council said this is not an exercise of the infallible magisterium, and we're not here to define anything new. We're here to reiterate everything that's been said before, and then to put a new orientation on existing teachings and come up with some pastoral praxis to present the gospel to the modern world in a better way. Okay, on paper, that's what they said. So Pope Francis said, this is the magisterium. And I would say, yes, it's the ordinary magisterium. So he says, the council is the magisterium of the church. Okay, yeah, ordinary magisterium. Either you are with the church, and therefore you follow the council, and if you don't follow the council, now we're getting into a compound sentence here.
Yeah.
Either you're with the church or not. True, you're either with the church or not. Do you follow the council or not? Well, here's the problem. What do you mean by follow the council?
Well, that's what we've been asking for
50
years.
60 years now. And did you know Archbishop Lefebvre submitted dubia?
No.
He did. He submitted dubia to the Pope about how to interpret questionable passages in Vatican II having to do with religious liberty and these other things. Now, this will be a pop quiz. Did they answer him or not?
Well, I don't know, but if I had to guess, I would say no, they did not answer.
They wrote, Ratzinger wrote a letter back to Lefebvre.
That's why I was wrong.
There you go. They answered him, but they never settled any of the questions. It was a lot of gobbledygook, like, with profound reflection upon these things, and understood by the living, breathing, heart-beating, sweating, etc., of magisterium of the church, blah, 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 blah. And it really didn't give an answer on how to square Vatican II with tradition. Let's continue on here with what he says. Okay. Therefore you follow the council. What does that mean? Or if you don't follow the council, what's that mean? Which part of it? I mean, the council did say that we believe in one God. It might shock you. Vatican II did teach some truths, that there's one God, that Jesus Christ is the only Son of God, that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son, that he's also God, the whole Nicene Creed. That was taught by the Vatican II Council, believe it or not. If you don't follow the council or you interpret it in your own way as you desire, you do not stand with the church. Well, the problem is, how are we supposed to interpret it? Because Benedict, JP2, Francis, none of these guys would actually tell us how to properly interpret the council with respect to the tradition. Because you have these conflicting statements of before and after the council, and Archbishop Lefebvre said, well, how do you square these? And how can you change doctrine? And nobody could give him an answer. They just wave their hands and say, you have to be obedient. You need to listen to me. This is the magisterium. Why aren't you listening? And your proper answer to that is, how can the magisterium be muddled and unclear? That is the exact opposite of what the magisterium is. The magisterium is a teaching authority whereby you know the difference between truth and falsehood, and the church teaches this. But the whole effect of Vatican II, and even in the documents themselves, is this muddled ambiguity that you have no idea what they're saying. Because in the same document, it'll say, A, and then not A, and then it tries to come to some kind of synthesis relating these two things together. Like, well, Latin is to be retained, but also the vernacular should be introduced. And in those places where it's appropriate, okay, that's quite ambiguous, and who gets to decide this? Again, that's a whole rabbit hole. So you're not allowed to interpret it in your own way.
Well, and you have the people that say, oh, well, the council wasn't properly implemented. And you have those, and people that attend the Latin Mass or whatever, the extraordinary form Catholics that say, oh, well, I like both the ordinary and the extraordinary form. And they say, oh, the council wasn't properly implemented. Even Bishop Barron says that.
He does.
The council wasn't properly implemented. Well, then
why did it, 60 years later, and you've had your kings out there, JP2, Benedict, Francis, how come they still can't get it right?
Well, so
what's the problem with them? Why can't they interpret it correctly? And all you bishops, please name who are the popes and the bishops who have not implemented Vatican II correctly. Name them, please. Let's know who they are and find out what they did wrong instead of these vagaries or whatnot.
And then how to implement the council correctly.
How to do it correctly. Please tell us.
It's been 50 years.
Are you supposed to keep Latin or not? Are you supposed to keep Gregorian chant or not? Are you supposed to do a new mass or not? Are you supposed to take off your religious habit or not? Are you supposed to baptize heathens or not? It's not. You never told us. So anyway, let's continue with this nonsense here. Interpret in your own way as you desire. You do not stand with the church. Again, it's an act of the ordinary magisterium. In some ways, it's not in conformity with tradition. Everything is vague, so it's open to interpretation. So you can't condemn people for interpreting it in various different ways. Otherwise, he would have had to condemn all of his Novus Ordo bishops. People like Mahoney and Gumbleton or whatever, or Weakland, or McCarrick, any of these guys, he would have had to correct them or whatever. So he says that there be no concession to those who seek to present a catechism that does not agree with the magisterium of the church. Well, this is interesting, because this is exactly what we've been saying the whole time, is that your catechesis, your catechism, and your teaching has to agree with the magisterium of the church. Now we come up with a problem. What about Amoris Laetitia? It doesn't agree with the magisterium of the church. So there you go. Pope Francis, he should take his own words and eat them, because he stands condemned by what he just said. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. Have a happy Septuagesima week. This has been the Eternal Vigano Television Network Weekly News. And remember, we are the laity,
and we will not be silent.